Monarch episode 5 is out, and this is the one where they really make it clear that this show is never really about the Titans or Monarch. It's a soap opera where they want to push the crap that they want to push. Tim, who's like the main antagonist, is seeking approval from the girl that he was the boss of a couple episodes ago. The one plus I'll give the show is that they reference Lee going through some kind of incident as to why he looks so young. So I'm glad that it's finally been at least alluded to, whether or not they have a good explanation for it. Kate, who is the protagonist for the first 4 episodes, turns out she's a piece of crap too. Continuing on the streak of no likable characters or interesting characters, this show just goes all the way with it. After episode 3, my video was called It's a Bait and Switch. And besides the fact that this episode 100% confirmed it, I went and watched the inside look on Apple TV, and literally all the little interviews, they're talking about the Monsterverse, they're talking about Godzilla, they're talking about how cool the Titans are. At no point do they say, hey, this show is a soap opera that we couldn't get funded, so we called it part of the Monsterverse and threw some Monarch and Titans in, which I'm pretty confident is the case at this point. And if it's not the case, then these writers are astonishingly incompetent. But everything for the advertising, even including the inside look shit with all the actors, is them talking about Godzilla and how it's a property that's been around for 70 years and the Monsterverse and blah, blah, blah. A bunch of people were calling me an idiot in the comments. I haven't seen any evidence that leads me to believe that the marketing for this show was anything other than this is a show about the Titans and they've been non-existent. So I just wanted to point that out. So let's just go through it because this one was probably the worst one to me by far as the meta stuff. And as far as the storytelling, it's absolute garbage. They think they're Indiana Jones at the end with like the most ridiculous ass pool bullshit I've ever seen. So let's just go into it. We pick up where we left off episode 4. They're in like a Monarch prison-based thing, and they have each one of them in cells. Kate's just kind of sitting there. Kentaro is pouting and throwing a chair and saying, do you know who my dad is? Because, you know, every guy has to be an asshole. Lee is being interrogated, but he's not really giving up anything. May is in recovery, and the Russian chick or whatever she is, I don't even know her name, comes to talk to her, and she shows her that she knows her real name and stuff, which is supposed to be impressive, but you would think with all the camera footage and their addresses and stuff that they would have had all this information a while ago. Like the way that it's portrayed here is they make it seem like they just found out, but they saw all of them go get Lee. They went to Kentaro and May's place, which I think her real name is Lyra. So they should have this information. They're like a black ops corporation or a CIA style corporation, whatever you want to call them. They're a dirty organization pretty openly. You'd think they would have the information well before this. And they present it as if they just found it. The 3 baddies meet and they're lecturing Tim, and Tim's like, we're treating them like they're criminals. These are Hiroshi Randa's kids. Obviously, this is the bloodline from Randa and Keiko to Hiroshi to Kentaro and Kate. Kate's a school teacher, Kentaro's an artist. He's like, we're treating them like convicts. Why don't we let them go and see what they do and then just follow them? Which is a fine plan. I mean, it's not particularly original or anything, but whatever. If you're going to do that route, you should probably treat them better. When they show the outside of this base at the beginning, you can see that they're in the middle of Alaska, obviously in the middle of nowhere with no way to leave. So there's no danger in just letting them kind of hang out, giving them food, treating them decently, and just being kind of like, hey, don't cause any trouble or we'll have to put you in a cell. And leave it at that. So that's what this whole meeting is. That's what they accomplish, I guess, if you want to say that's a plan. And then we move on. And this part right here, like if you didn't realize that Tim was already a completely incompetent, bumbling idiot of a villain, he gives them their passports, gives them their money, is trying to be all nice to them. He's just acting like a bitch. And then they call him a prick and an asshole and a prick asshole, which I guess they think is like clever dialogue, whatever. But he gives them money, passports, plane tickets, tells them to go home. And after they're being kind of ungrateful, he snaps at them. And he's like, you guys don't even know what you've gotten yourselves into. You're lucky you're still alive, which is true. And then he gets in the van and he asks the Russian lady, he's like, oh, how'd I do? And she's like, oh, you're learning. Like this guy is a 40-year-old man at least, acting like a bitch. Like they have all this authority. He's supposedly pretty high up in this dark company. He can't threaten some kids on his own without getting approval from his female boss who was his subordinate before. Like the show is just on the nose with the agenda at this point. I speculated about it for the first couple episodes just because of a few things I thought were weird. And this episode just really hammers it home. And we continue, they're at the airport now. They're flying to San Francisco. Kate's like, you know, I don't want to leave Lee behind. And May's like, look, we don't know where he is. We have no way to get to him. There's nothing we can do about it. She's going to go back to Tokyo. And then Kate and Kentaro insist they all stick together. which she listens to for some reason. I'm not really sure why. And in the never-ending quest to make May more dislikable than Skylar from Breaking Bad or Wendy from Ozark, she goes off on this poor airport lady about how much Alaska sucks. And I'm assuming this is an ad or a sponsor, tells them that she's going to give them a 2-star rating on TripAdvisor. And then she asks something and the lady says no, and she says 1 star. I'm assuming that's just a commercial in the middle of the show with terrible dialogue and not very subtly done. They're interrogating Lee, and Kurt Russell is charismatic enough to make this work. But this character is kind of like just a one-off weirdo. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the episode description for episode 6 says Lee and Keiko get closer at some ball or something, because we've been skipping the past timeline for these last 2 episodes. This is all in the present day again. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that Lee is going to end up being the actual grandparent of Kate and Kentaro, just based on that episode description alone and the fact that every person in the show is a piece of shit. So they're showing him footage. He's like, look, I told you everything. You guys have all the information. Monarch has always gotten it wrong. You know, he's kind of laughing and not really giving him anything. Kate, May, and Kentaro make it to the airport. This guy, Jeff, comes to pick them up. He's like wanting to give them hugs and take their coats. And he knows the mom. They're co-workers. You're going to find out that he's going to want to be the mom's boyfriend soon. And Kate doesn't like him for whatever reason. And Kentaro says the line here, he's very American, which I guess is the show's way of saying Americans are loud, obnoxious, in your personal space assholes. So the show's just fucking on the ball. James drops him off with the mom, and the mom's very happy to see Kate, and she's like, oh, you brought friends? And with all of the tact in the world, Kate goes, Mom, this is Kentaro Randa. So immediately the mom understands that her husband had a second family, and it's super awkward. She's like kind of upset, but she also kind of suspected that he was having an affair because he was gone so much. Just drama that doesn't really mean much, and I don't particularly give a shit about at this point. And this scene right here, I fucking absolutely hate. The mom is upset with Kentaro, obviously because it's her husband's mistress's kid from her eyes, and her and Kate are arguing, and the mom is like pretty upset, obviously, and Kate's like, you knew that he was having an affair, and you were too chicken shit to go, so you sent me. And the mom's like, sort of, yes, but also I thought it would be good for you because you were just wasting away in bed. You wouldn't go to any support groups or anything. And Kate goes, yeah, because pottery classes are going to bring my children back. And when that is said that way, it makes you think, oh, Kate had kids and a husband, and they died when Godzilla ran through San Francisco and the bridge and stuff. And what you'll find out is the my kids she's referring to is her students because she's a fucking teacher. And I hate this so fucking much. And this is like a very, very left-wing thing. And I'm also not willing to give charity for that because of everything else going on in the show. This view that the teachers are as much parents to their students as the actual parents are. You guys are fucking educators. Educate the children on stuff they need to learn. Let the parents teach the kids basic morals and religion and whatever else that's personal. This mentality of these are my children, I think it's disgusting and I fucking hate it. So this whole scene I hate. And I hate the scene itself because Kate's insulting her mom again. The mom sent the daughter off to find out if the dad was having an affair. Kind of a shitty move. And then Kentaro and May are in the bedroom listening to this awkward ass conversation like they didn't already know all this stuff and it was not going to be super awkward. So the whole thing for me is just terrible. It's just a ton of drama. Every character is an asshole at this point. There's no one to even root for, except for maybe the fucking Titans. Kate says they're going to the dad's office and it's in a restricted military zone. Apparently they used to do tours through the disaster area until the military cut it off, which is pretty disgraceful. And Kentaro says, my mom wanted to do one to see if she could find dad. So I guess that's supposed to be like a nice moment. I don't know. The mom bribes the guard because she's on good terms with them all and they all kind of work there, like this restoration zone. So they have until 8 in the morning to go to the office, get what they need, and get back to meet the mom and James at the truck that they were in the back of when they snuck in. And the mom explains to them, hey, the military's here. They shoot looters on sight. So that's how it is. We go back. They're still interrogating Lee. Nothing really comes from this, except this one really awkward line where this woman is trying to be intimidating. And I just do not buy her as intimidating. She just doesn't have nearly the presence for it. But she says to Lee, I could bury you deep or I could bury you shallow. And I sat there for like 20 seconds and I was like, I guess she means she can bury him deep in a prison cell or in a shallow grave. It's a really weird way to say it. I didn't like the line at all. This whole part of the show is just kind of a waste, other than the fact that they allude to he was part of some incident, but it's classified or in the files or something, which they also bitch at Tim for because he's like, I don't know, it's probably in the files because no one knows anything because it's all classified, even though they're a corporation. And they get mad at him for not knowing everything from 40 or 50 years ago. Our group of 3 is wandering through the city. At one point, Kentaro touches part of a building and it like collapses, which is loud as shit, but there's no military around, or they just don't hear it, I guess. But this whole tour that we're doing through San Francisco is pretty much so you can get backstory for Kate, and she has PTSD, obviously, and we get flashbacks to her story. And it turns out Kate's a lesbian. So when she said my kids, she meant my students, and she's got a girlfriend. Wouldn't be a big deal if everything else in the show wasn't very, very in your face with culture war shit. This is just one more grain of sand on the heap, I guess. Here you go, I changed the screenshot because I figured some people would enjoy that. And you can't see it right now, maybe because I have the screen cropped a little bit, but there's a rainbow flag in the back also. So it's just full blown, you know, we're going to openly push far left shit and support the agenda and incorporate it into the story, even though it's completely irrelevant to what's going on. Gotta tick another box off, I guess. I don't know. There you go. I went forward a couple seconds so you could see the rainbow flag there. We get this massive exposition dump from the girlfriend about how Kate's having to sneak out of her place because she's struggling to pay rent. As a teacher in San Francisco, I'm not surprised. And she's like, you know, why don't you come live with me? And they're both like, oh, you didn't learn your lesson, neither did you. So we know something happened. They openly say that Kate is staying at her place a lot and just paying for this place that she's not living in. So that's where we're headed with this, is they're going to move in together so they can afford to live, and they're a couple and blah, blah, blah. They're going to work together. They're both teachers at the same school. We get this kind of awkward scene here where there's like no kids in class because there's some kind of Godzilla warning or Titan warning, and they're debating whether or not to shut the school down. I don't really understand how any of that works. Like, it seems like if there's a big monster on the loose, they'd be at home. And if there's not a big monster on the loose, how would they know? That's not very clear to me. This whole flashback, we get like a G-Day -2 countdown or 1 countdown or whatever until Godzilla is going to show up. And obviously, he does, because that's her whole PTSD thing. And this is another thing that I think was deliberate. You can kind of tell in the picture, it's a pretty mixed group of kids. And one of the white kids named Chad, his dad is supposed to be a conspiracy theorist and say that this is all CGI to drive up property value or some nonsense. So the white boy named Chad has a conspiracy theorist for a dad. Again, wouldn't be a big deal in a vacuum. Based on the rest of the show, I think that shit's deliberate. We go back to the present. They're still sneaking around. And by sneaking, I mean Kentaro and Kate are singing jingles that their dad used to sing from commercials pretty loudly in a super quiet city while they have flashlights, and they run into the military, and the military starts chasing them. Again, the characters are all fucking idiots. Kentaro has no chemistry with anybody. May doesn't have any chemistry with Kentaro or Kate, and Kate doesn't really have any chemistry with anybody either. So I don't know what's going on. I feel like the whole thing just feels awkward. It feels like they're acting. It doesn't feel like they're real people in this world who are half siblings kind of trying to bond over this quirky thing that their dad did when they were younger. They flee in the present. We get a cut back to the past again. This is where you see the kids getting on buses. They have to go across the bridge. And obviously Kate's PTSD thing in the very first scene was trying to get the kids off the bus, and then Godzilla walked through the bridge and the bus fell into the river. Obviously all the kids died is the implication, and she blames herself, which isn't a bad setup for a backstory, but everything else about her is dog shit. They run from the police or the military. They're hiding in like the most obvious place possible. But luckily there's some homeless people down the street, which saves them because the homeless people start running. And then they run down the other direction of the tunnel from the cops. Kate's having like a PTSD panic attack type thing. And then Kentaro says he'll go look through the tunnels until they find an exit so they don't get trapped because Kate's freaking out. That's a really ugly pause screen that I just hit for Kate. So Kate is doing this thing where it's flashing back and forth where she's seeing Kentaro and her dad. And she's like, just leave them, blah, blah, blah. And she's really upset. And May is comforting her. And I said, I think after episode 1 or 2, that I thought this would lead to May and Kentaro getting back together. But now I'm kind of wondering if Kate and May are going to get together. Who knows? Shit's a soap opera. We cut back to the past. Kate wakes up in bed with some other chick who's not the girl that we saw earlier. And the girl we saw earlier is texting her. Obviously, Kate is cheating on her with this other girl. And in case you're wondering whether or not Kate is smart, she sleeps with like 100 books above her head. So yeah, this episode, the writers were like, why don't we make sure that there is absolutely no one in this show that you can root for, except kind of Kurt Russell, but that's only because he's charismatic. And they'll probably fuck that up the next episode anyway. Because they said pretty early in the show that Lee did something that Randa couldn't forgive him for. So I'm assuming he hooks up with Keiko and is the grandfather. Eventually they escape. Kate is really upset and she's like, I don't deserve this. No one should treat me well because I'm a piece of shit. And that's right after the flashback to her cheating on her girlfriend that she was considering moving in with. Kentaro finds the picture of their dad, Kate, and Kate's mom. Obviously the same setup he had in Tokyo, except with his family. And they're looking through his office, and this is like the biggest ass pool I've seen in maybe any show ever. It's astonishing to me that they wrote this way. They find one of those maps with the weird radiation logging thing that we've seen all show. That's like the figure 8 looking thing over the map, except there's no map of the continents on it. And he sees some kind of marking on the thing and starts coloring those points in. Honestly, it's not even clear to me what he sees. And then he punches holes in the paper. Luckily, it's about to be sunrise. He says, hey, put the map back where it was before I tore it off the wall. He holds this paper up in front of the sunlight. These sunbeams go through the paper and point to certain spots on the map, and they start to see continents. I have no idea how. This is what they're looking at, and you can see it's just squiggly lines and shit. But then she points at one and goes, North America, Alaska, Africa. And I'm like, what in the fuck are you guys even looking at? So this entire scene is just absolute dog shit. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how they thought of it. Even seeing what they're doing, I don't understand any of it. It's just nonsense. The whole scene is just fucking trash. And the show at this point just seems like they were like, how can we have an excuse to just travel around the world and have it covered by a film budget or a TV show budget? Because I'm pretty sure the next episode is going to be in Africa. And I think when I looked at the inside look thing, that Godzilla might actually show up when they're in Africa for some reason. They go meet up with the mom. She says, hey, I'm going to find dad. And she tells her mom that her dad probably isn't dead because of the stuff that they've been finding, like in Alaska. And well, really, they just found some abandoned stuff and some pencil shavings, but fuck it. That's good enough, I guess. And May, in case you were wondering, is she like mostly a cunt or a total cunt? Here she goes and calls Monarch and says, what do I have to do to go home? So she's going to turn on him. So the answer, which you probably already knew, is that she's a total cunt. It's astonishing to me that they don't make any of these characters likable. Like, you don't have to make someone flawless, but you can make them at least a decent person. Every person in this show is an asshole. It's actually amazing to me. It's like the writers came from a different planet and were like, oh, humans do this, right? But anyway, that's the end of the episode. The show is fucking terrible. We're halfway through. I'm assuming next week Lee is going to hook up with Keiko, and we're just going to go for 100% assholes the show. If anybody else has been actually watching this besides me, let me know what you think in the comments. It seems like it's got decent support online. Of course, when you're in the Godzilla subreddit, it's not surprising. But let me know what you think. Like and subscribe and all that shit. See ya. Thanks.